How was I aware of shades of black, but not aware of my own blackness? Hello, and welcome to Alt With Lella. I am your lovely host, Layla, a poet, an Afro-Feminist, life coach, and an artist. Really, what I am is a magician. And Alt With Lella is a lifestyle podcast that offers you alternative ways of feeling, thinking, and living outside of societal conditioning from an Afro-Feminist perspective. Alt With Lella mainly serves as a prompt to the listener to rethink and reflect on what we accept as norm, culture, and heritage. Make sure to click the subscribe button to get notified about new episodes. You can also find Alt With Lella on Instagram and TikTok as Alt With Lella. And if you're interested, you can find my personal account at A Lifetime With Layla on both of these platforms. While you're at it, you can check out my website at lifetimewithlayla.com to access the services I provide. Thank you and enjoy. Hello and welcome to Alt With Layla's second episode. I'm happy to have you here and thank you so much for tuning in. As you can tell by the title, it's called Being a Black Child. And like I said in the last episode, I kind of want to give you a background of myself, of Layla, and what shaped me as a young girl and why I am the way I am today. And being Black is one of the significant things about me that has shaped my experiences and my outlook as well. And also, like I said in the last episode, I am a feminist. I am an Afro-Feminist. And the Afro comes first because I have been Black and I will stay Black. Thank you. One of the things that came up for me when I was preparing for this podcast, or like thinking about what I want to say and how I want to put it, is that I realized, like, actually, to be honest, this is not when I was preparing for this podcast, is not when I realized, but when I traveled outside of Ethiopia. But one of the things that I realized when I was a child is that I never knew that I was Black. I never knew that I was Black. I knew shades of Black. I knew in which shade I was, and that there was other lighter shades and then darker shades, but I never knew that I was Black. And I want to make it clear that I didn't say, "Oh my God, I'm not Black." I never did that. It wasn't because I claimed not being Black. It was just a not knowing or not identifying as such, because identification needs to be necessary, and it was never necessary. And also in Ethiopia, I never felt discriminated or stigmatized against because of my color, or actually not color, because of my Blackness. But I do remember, again, shades of Black, understanding shades of Black, because again, I remember being stigmatized and discriminated against because of my shade of Black. And I find those two facts so fascinating. And I hope that you find it fascinating as well. So how did I understand? How did I know that shades of Black existed, but not actually being Black? Well, let's get into it. Um, so I have a sister. I have an older sister that is literally my bestie, and she's a light skinned person, and I would be, I think, a dark skinned girl. Maybe not extremely dark skin, but somewhere I'm definitely in the darker skin section than I am in the lighter skin section. I remember my sister getting a lot of compliments and getting people just treating her nicer and better than they did me. And on top of that, I remember feeling I don't remember a day in my young life where I felt beautiful, where I felt pretty. And I know that it has a lot to do with my skin tone, because there was really no other good reason for me to feel ugly at that time. And because I also remember associating light skinnedness to beauty. And therefore, that meant, directly or indirectly, really, whichever way you go about it, it meant that I was ugly. It meant that I was not beautiful. So I was like, sold, you know? And that's how I understood shades of black existed and totally missed the fact that I was black. And you know what's interesting? Like, even growing up, there's so many Amharic sayings, derogative. I think they're derogative at the end of the day. They enforce and perpetuate colorism. There is a saying, for instance, "Yet konjo," that directly translates to, or maybe not so directly, as I'll do my best, translates to a black beauty. But the way they put it is that you overcame your blackness and still you are beautiful. As if being black or being dark skinned is inherently ugly, right? But despite that, you made it. You made it on the other side, you know? And that's the type of, and you know what? Like, no one sat me down and told me I'm ugly because I'm dark skinned, you know? That's why it's so interesting. These are so subliminal. And then they're also, you just pick them up. You just pick them up without actually no one telling you directly. And then later I'll also get into, texturism as well, but which is also an experience of being a black child in Ethiopia. And yeah, and again, like a lot of people were nicer to my sister and kinder to her, but maybe that has also a lot to do with me being a very serious child. Like, I had a frown all the time. Like, I was not about it. I'm not I wasn't gonna play with anyone, or like I wasn't in the mood generally, because I remember also finding adults so annoying, because I remember they would talk to me like I'm a infant and be like, "Hey, what's your name?" and then, "How old are you?" And I really despised those conversations, and I also really, really despised just strangers talking to me because I'm a child. That was one of my greatest pet peeves, because why are you talking to me? And so would have a frown all the time. And I guess, like, dark skin and a frown is not a good combo, you know? Then you're really asking for it or something. But I was a child, imagine. But anyway, so that's how I kind of understood that, there are shades of black, and I am on the darker side. And I did find light skinned people I preferred light skinned people in terms of, like, who I thought was beautiful and who I didn't, you know? And if I remember, I will say more on the sayings, Amharic sayings that perpetuate colorism. And also, I just want to say that colorism is not something I was familiar with, the phrase at least, or the vocabulary for this experience. I found out about it not long ago. Not by long, I mean like years, a few years, I think. And that's also thanks to my sister. Shout out to you, Maya. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, the messaging is so subliminal. No one sat me down and was like, "You're ugly because you're dark skinned and she's beautiful because she's light skinned." It's also subliminal, and you just kind of pick it up as you go, and you internalize that. And one of the ways is media, right? In the media, you never see you're a dark skinned girl or a guy in lead roles or anchors, or even back. I'm talking about back in the day. There may be it's a different story, although I don't think so, but still. And you know what? This reminds me of, recently I made a TikTok. I made like a fun of this girl, not fun, but I made a parody of her of her talking about, she was flexing about being light skinned, and I had to, like, obviously put a stop to it. So, and then, I don't know, I wouldn't say it went viral, but it did stir up a lot of conversation. And one of the thing is that, and after that, I started really paying attention to the media. And then, you know what I noticed? I swear to you, like, there's like a TV channel, Ethiopian TV channel, where they just show movies back to back, Ethiopian movies back to back. I forget the name. But what I've noticed is that, tell me why in these movies, right? The antagonist or the villain in the story is like literally the most dark skinned man you've ever seen in your life. Tell me why. And then the damsel in distress, or the protagonist, is like this beautiful light skinned girl. And I say beautiful, not because she's light skinned, because she's beautiful, period. And I would have said that about anybody. But yeah, any skin tone in me. And I'm like, oh, no wonder, no wonder, like, where can you be black and peace? Really, that was really what left, the question that it left in me. Where can I be black and peace? Where people don't think I'm a horrible person just because I'm dark skinned, where people don't think I'm up to no good because I'm dark skinned, or like they associate all of these negative traits with a dark skinned person. And next time you see a dark skinned person, that's exactly what you're gonna think. And it's and I noticed it actually. I really intentionally sat and saw those movies, and I was like, oh, why am I not surprised? And this is the type of subliminal messaging that I was referring to earlier. And I wanted to bring it up because, again, you just pick it up without really taking notes, if you will, if that makes sense at all. And it's also non-consensual, the messaging. You don't choose. If you choose to hear it, to watch the movie, I guess it is consensual, but you did not sign up for colorism. You know what I mean? And also another experience that I had is in schools. Oh my God, I can't even get started. Like in the classroom, like the light skinned girl is favored, period. And all of us are like, bottom of the barrel. It's it was really blatant. I recall, let me tell you a story. I was in third grade. I had a horrible homeroom teacher that insisted on like beating us with the ruler every time. Like we would be doing a reading, right? And then somebody would be reading, and then she'd be like, "Hey, where is she at in the reading?" And if you don't know where the reader is at in the paragraph or whatever in the text, you'd get a beating. And she was really, really horrible. Okay, but there was so and if this light skinned girl, who was her favorite, by the way, for no good reason, I might add, she wasn't even good in class. I get it. If a student is like really good in class and listens to you, I get it. I'm also a teacher, so I understand. But damn. So I remember she would tell her, she would never ask her where the reader is at. She would be the one reading. She'd be chosen to read. And then I remember there was a time where we were checking, like, the teacher at the end of the semester or something, or a term, um, checks your book to see how well your handwriting is, or how well you've done your homeworks, and then gives you like a grade out of like 40 for your textbook. Like not textbook, but like your notebook for the class. And I remember like I'm shaking and trembling because I'm gonna get the shit end of that stick. And I remember hers was so bad. Like it was so bad. And I remember right in front of my eyes, the teacher glazed through it, and she like did the biggest like, right ticks all over it. And she gave her like 20 out of 20 or 40, just a full grade. And the way my jaw dropped. In that moment, I was like, oh, nothing matters, and nothing that I do matters at this point for this teacher. And I remember it's so blatant and it's so in your face. It's not even, they don't even bother hiding that. They will let you know that you are unworthy, you know? And that's from a teacher, and that's from a school where I'm supposed to learn. And that's what I learned, that my skin tone matters and when it shouldn't. And that's another experience that also made me understand which shade of black I am. Even though, again, no idea that I was black. Oh yeah, and actually, I think the better way to put the previous saying, "የጥቁር ቆንጆ," earlier, a better translation actually is black yet beautiful. That is a better way to put it. That is a better translation because again, it also signifies that you have overcome your blackness, and then still you're beautiful. Like good on you, you know? And this is normal. This is your day in and day out type of thing. This is our daily bread, you know? And also, they use the term baria. Baria means slave. That's the literal translation. And they refer to dark skinned people as baria. Barcho. And I'm just like, Jesus, Lord, help me. And I never was okay with it then. And there's so many other like terms that they refer to dark skinned people. I forget now, but there's so many other ways that they call you by your darkness or by your skin tone. And obviously they would do the same thing with light skinned people, but still the baria, the calling a dark skinned person slave to address them is some next level. It's next level and it's so normalized. So you can't sit and tell me that colorism does not exist in Ethiopia. Another thing that shaped my experience as a Black child is my Black features. I have large lips. If you know me, you know that. And used to be one of my biggest insecurities as a child, to be honest. I would never got bullied per se, but people pointed it out in so many different commentary and ways. Like everything that I would put on my lips would be so much more visible than any other time, than any other person's lip if they had a smaller lip than me. And there would just be so many comments around my lip and how big it is, or oh my God, you're like unpleasant comments that made me feel insecure, that made me self-conscious about my lips. And again, I ask, where can I be Black in peace? Where can I be Black in peace? If I'm not Black in peace in an African country, where a girl gotta go? Where a girl gotta go? Just tell me where and I'll go. I won't, but I would like to. But still, like, I demand to be Black in peace in my own country. That's what I want. And regarding my lips, it took me a lot of time to like love myself and appreciate my dark skin and love my lips. And now everybody wants bigger lips. Like, make that make sense. I think it's convoluted, if I'm using the word right. All that has actually affected the way I had perceived my Blackness and my Black features. It makes you hate being who you are in a place where everybody's like you. And so the self-hate is on a national level, is what I'm trying to say. And then another thing about being Black is textures, right? Your hair texture. So growing up, I have like looser curls, if you will, and then my sister had like more denser curls or coilier curls. So I remember whenever I would, whenever I went to the hair salon or anybody made a comment about my hair, they're like, "Oh my God, your hair is so nice. I love your hair. Wow, your hair is so." I never got a bad compliment. Like I never got a bad comment about my hair. And I remember people talking negatively about my sister's hair. And I used to grind my gears and they'd be like, "Oh, your hair is like really hard to deal with," or just unnecessary comments that need not to be made to a child. And that and that and I remember it's because of texturism. I mean, I don't again, the wording was not there earlier, but I remember being favored with my hair in that way, as opposed to versus my skin tone, right? We as a society promoted white beauty standards and promoted anti-Blackness. And that's why I say the self-hate is on a national level. Because I know that and the thing is, like people with like the coilier hair would be the ones complimenting my hair. So it's not that they're also doing themselves a disservice. As they're complimenting me, they're perpetuating self-hatred because they prefer my hair over theirs, you know? And that's why I'm saying it's not I don't think it's I don't think it comes from I'm better than you, you know? It's about why beauty is better than all of us. So the closer you are to those to to white beauty standards or white proximity, right? The better off you are, the better treated you are in your own Black community. And I find that absolutely not okay. And I will not stand for it. And I remember recently, actually, my sister, um, my sister told me, like we used to measure our hair. Oh my God, like let's check how long my hair is, and then pull it straight, make it real straight, because our hair is curly, right? And be like, yeah, this is where it is. And my sister recently informed me that actually where your hair is at with curls is how long it is. It's not, you don't straighten your hair to know how long your hair is. That's not how you, because that's not your hair. That's not the way it naturally is. So measuring your hair by straightening it, you're doing yourself disservice, because that's not where your hair is at. The length of your hair should be measured at its natural state. And that's another thing. Like we used to be obsessed with getting our hair straightened, just just for that white proximity privilege. Now that I look back, that's what it is. And now I barely get my hair straightened, you know? And you know what? Like, don't get me wrong. I don't blame or accuse anyone of trying to, of straightening their hair, because the statistics are such that if you do those things, you get treated better, period. So I'm not out here trying to blame anybody for trying to get a better treatment from our society. What actually really needs to happen is to, you know, break down those types of mentality or decolonize our minds. And what really gets me regarding decolonizing our minds is we we pride ourselves as Ethiopians, that pride ourselves of not being colonized, and yet here we are being anti-black as hell and promoting white beauty standards. Like, make that make sense. Like, where did the where like how, And what I do want to say regarding the decolonization of our minds, and us being proud of not being colonized, that pride and the anti-blackness that exists clashes for me extremely. Ethiopia now being colonized and having so much pride, and then at the same time being the more like extremely anti-black, right? And I don't know how that makes sense. But you know what I found interesting? That, like, when I grew up, and there was like there was a channel called TV Africa, and they would have a lot of like countries from other countries from Africa doing their dance and whatever. And I remember distinctly saying, "Oh my God, African dance." I remember saying that as a child, because I thought somehow that was an African dance. And Africa was not like, that was separate from me somehow. And again, no one sat me down, told me Ethiopians are like separate from Africa. No one did, right? But I remember I remember feeling separate from that experience. And then our traditional dance would have a name, but literally any other dances that is in Ethiopia would be an African dance. And I didn't label ours as an African dance. You know what I mean? And I remember distinctly, I'm just walking you through these I guess points in my life, you know. And I think it's important. And I had to like leave Ethiopia to be African. So this leads me to where when did I find out that I was Black, right? I I got a scholarship when I was 18, and I went to China to study. Absolutely love China. Obsessed with China. Obsessed, actually. I will definitely do another episode about that. But I remember people, like, first of all, in China, like, it was also rare. I wouldn't say they're racist. I wouldn't say that at all. But it's just there's a shock factor when they see Black people. That's what it is. They're just shocked because maybe most likely never seen a Black person. And I remember this incident where a child came to me and kind of like rubbed, like, kind of put her hands on my skin, and then looked at her hands as if as if I kind of rubbed off on her like I'm some sort of charcoal ash. I thought that was really funny. And I'm like, no, I don't, my Black doesn't wipe off, ma'am. But yeah. And again, it was more of a shock factor. So I like when I found out when I was black, is I remember people made it a thing. Like it was a thing that I was black, you know? Like people made it out to comment that I was black. They're like, "Oh my God, black person. Oh my God, black person." And people and I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm black." You know? Uh, it was never a thing for me because obviously I lived in in Ethiopia and everybody's black. And that way you kind of it's a safe space to be black in some ways, you know. But yeah, it was, and I was like, okay, I am different and I will be treated differently due to my skin color. And then I remember I was partying one time and there was this Nigerian man, and then there's just like a set of bars and clubs, right? And then he was telling me that is a Nigerian man's club. That's a Nigerian man's club. And I'm like, that's a black man's club, he was saying. And I was like, what a, and mind you, I'm 18, okay? And I'm like, what a strange way to put it. Like, why did you have to go so hard on that? Why are you making it a thing? You know? And now I get it. And now I get it. I get it now. And that's when, and it took me only a few years to get it because if I'm here and open a business or a club, I won't be like, a black girls club. There's no need for that, you know? But when it's like you've overcome the obstacles that you are faced with because of your blackness. And so therefore you're proud, you know? And I remember he was telling me some of his experiences that he had in China and like abroad and traveling. And I don't remember resonating with them because again, not my experience, or at least not yet. That's when I was like, I'm black as fruit, you know? I am black. And that's how the world will see me. And then and I met so many amazing black people in China that educated me on race, because I don't have that experience. It's colorism, not racism, that I experienced here in Ethiopia. And then I remember making so many friends from other African countries, and then they would dance, and I'd be like, I would have no clue on how to dance. And I used to be made fun of for not I would only know skista, which is the traditional Ethiopian dance, and some other types of traditional dances, but uh, it was embarrassing. I'm not gonna lie. I was embarrassed for not being educated enough about my blackness, for not being educated enough about my Africanness. It was an embarrassing time for me, and that's why I said earlier, like I had to leave Ethiopia to become African, and now I'm African. I would choose African than any other distinction, because yes, I am Ethiopian, but being Ethiopian or having that identity has somehow ostracized me or gave me this weird superiority complex, you know? And that, mind you, like I did not even seek out to be that way. It was so subliminal, these types of messaging, because there is no, you're not educated about your Africanness, you know? And that's how we remain like um scrambled, really. And I do have a poem as well for this episode about being black, and I'll share it with you at the end of this podcast. And again, pride is great and all. Pride is great and all, but is it hindering the integration with other African communities or African countries? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And to this day, like I saw a video, this guy was like, you know how people randomly meet you on the street and interview you? He asked him, where are you from? Like, he's like, I'm half black, half Ethiopian. And I'm like, sir, I have news for you. And this is the type of issue that we need to really, really address, that we don't think that we are black. But you step one foot outside of Ethiopia and you're black, and you're treated like a black person because that's what you are. And the sooner you wrap your brain around that, the better your experience and your solidarity will be with other black people around the world. And you know what else? This has led me to like me me being pro black if you will, or me learning about my blackness, me learning to love my skin tone, my black features, my black hair, everything. Like, I'm so obsessed with myself currently. And that it took me a lot of years to do that. And I'll tell you something very interesting my sister said to me, because I used to have a lot of friends who were white, and here also in Ethiopia. And I remember at some point I had to cut out almost all of them. I had to cut them out because I realized it was during the Black Lives Matter like upheaval, if you will. And I remember realizing that, oh, like, you're not you can't be you have to be actively anti-racist. You can't just be not racist, you know? And I noticed that who of my friends, right? If anybody was being racist, because it's a thing when white people are together, the way they talk about black people is very different than when a black person is present. And I'm wondering to myself, which one of my white friends would be actively anti-racist in that context? And to be honest with you, I didn't have a lot of I didn't have many friends left after that evaluation. One of the things my sister told me that stuck with me was that imagine all the things you had to do to overcome, to learn, unlearn, to love who you are, to love your black skin, to abolish your prejudice. And you have to do that because you are the receiving end of your own self-hates, right? So it makes sense that you would put in the work. But for a white person, why would they do that? Right? So imagine if you had to do all that work to get to where you are today, right? Why there is no motivation for a white person to do that outside of, being a decent human being and, being conscious about the, inequalities. But that is not a common thing, because a lot of times if you're not getting horrible treatment, you don't care, or you're totally oblivious to it, right? And so and she said that to me. Imagine the work that you had to do, and then they would have to do the same level of work to be constantly or actively anti-racist. And I'm like, holy shit, that makes a lot of sense. And that's when you're like, okay, you have to be exceptional to do that type of work. And to be honest, that eliminated, unfortunately, the majority of my white companions and also partners as well. And I want to talk about the TikTok video that I mentioned earlier. So basically, there was a TikTok trend that said, of course we have ADHD, blah, 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 blah. Of course we have, I don't know, of course I'm a single mom, or like whatever, those types of trend. So tell me why this girl is like, um, of course I am light skinned. Everybody calls me Faranj. Faranj means white person or a foreigner. And she was it was a flex, okay? The white proximity was a flex. And then she was like, uh, of course I'm light skinned. I can't go out in the sun without an umbrella. I'm like, okay, I guess. Okay. And then what other whack ass stuff did she say? So one of the crazy things that this girl said is, um this girl said on her TikTok, I'm sorry, I just have to mention it, is she said, of course we're light skinned people. We prefer light skinned men. And I'm like, ain't no way. She's like, could you be more colorist? Like, could you try a little harder to enforce colorism, please? Thank you. That is not a flex. And that brings me to the idea of preferences, which is another thing that I had to really unpack, because the idea of preferences is actually rooted in a lot of prejudice. Whenever you find yourself conveniently attracted to a light skinned person, investigate that. Yeah, investigate that. And uh, when you find yourself meeting white people and having positive thoughts about them, investigate that. And then when you see a dark skinned person and then you immediately have some type of feeling, investigate that. Self inquiry is key. So, yeah, I think that's enough yapping for this second episode. And I hope that you've kind of grasped the points in my life that have resulted in me being an Afro-feminist and a big, big, big Pan-African who is obsessed with Africa and obsessed with being African. And without further ado, I'll share my poem with you. A box is a limited space that also has a lid to forbid and then put aside. You can't put my black in a box. You can try, but my black shines so bright it seeps through every slit and crack. You can't cut and edit my beautiful black opinion and thought. You can try, but my black voice reverberates from space down to you like a goddamn astronaut. My black is not a cat. Therefore, I'm not a fan of a box. My black body is adored by, so many. My curvaceous booty, squats, nah, not necessary. My hair that is curly, my voluptuous lips that are full and ready, don't need to pump them with fat from my belly. I'm a good dancer because my life is a dance to the rhythms my ancestors composed fighting for their freedom and rights. My black culture has a following. Fans that pay to wear it, flaunt it, consequently mimic it, and claim they love it and understand it. It's that type of fish love where you say you love fish and fry it and eat it. I don't want none of that fish loving, for it is my death. It takes my last breath, leaves you satisfied, nourished as I lie on my deathbed. Take, take. Reject, reject, reject the human being that gave. End scene. And again, thank you so much for listening. And because Alt With Lella serves as a prompt to the listener, I invite you to investigate yourself and your preferences. Why do you prefer certain people? Or why do you have a certain type in romantic contexts? And in what ways do you perpetrate anti-Blackness? Even in yourself. So when you talk about your hair, when you talk about your skin tone, when you talk about beauty standards, investigate your beauty standards. What are they? What are they? And why are they like the way that they are? And I invite you to also identify, or why, if you don't identify as a Black person who's actually Ethiopian, why is that? Why do you think you're not Black? Because I promise you that you are. And also another thing that I would like to invite you if you're listening as a non-Black person or a white person is, are you actively anti-racist? Or do you allow racist commentary or racist friends to be around you? And why do you think that is? In what way do you remain silent again in regards to racism and colorism? In what ways do you perpetuate racism and colorism in your own life, in your own day-to-day? All right. Thank you so much for listening. And that is a wrap on the second episode of Alt With Lella, Being a Black Child. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. You can also find Alt With Lella on Instagram and TikTok as Alt With Lella. And if you're interested, you can find my personal account at A Lifetime With Lella on both of these platforms. While you're at it, you can check out my website, altwithlella.com, to access the services I provide. Thank you for listening, and goodbye until next time.